Since I will be helping out from time to time in the parish, Father Mike suggested I tell you a little bit about myself. So at the beginning I told you about my new ministry with Leadership Roundtable. And let me put you at ease, I will not be taking up a second collection for Leadership Roundtable today. That's not what this is about. But let me tell you something else about myself. I love to travel. I've been in over 50 countries around this incredibly beautiful world that God created for us. In fact, about 10 years ago, I went on a pilgrimage with many members of St. Pius Parish to Italy. It was a great experience. I love to travel because you meet people, experience different foods, cultures, languages, how people think, you know. I never realized how I thought or how my thinking works until I experienced how other people think. And so traveling can be a very rich experience. One other thing I've experienced about 5 times now in my travels is an earthquake. Has anybody here ever experienced an earthquake? Let me see hands. Okay, a lot of you. In fact, I heard on the news there was a very small earthquake Tuesday night in Columbia, Maryland. And most people didn't even feel it. But there was that one about, what, 12 years ago in August that we all felt. I felt earthquakes in Cyprus, Nicaragua, El Salvador. I wasn't there for it, but I was there 3 days after the huge earthquake in Sichuan, China in 2008. So feeling an earthquake or seeing the effects of it, really boggles the mind. But one reaction I had was this. If you can't even trust the ground you're standing on, what can you trust? Because we think of the ground, I mean, we get out of bed in the morning, we step on the ground, we think the ground is going to be there, it's always going to be there, it's stable, we build lots of things on it, we drive on it, it's the thing that's there. We depend on it at every moment of our lives. And then all of a sudden you realize it can shake. And I can't even trust the ground I stand on. Well, I would say the experience of the pandemic is similar. Because as with an earthquake, you come to the realization that the ground is not nearly as stable as you think. In the pandemic, we couldn't even trust the air we breathe. We couldn't trust getting close to the people we love. And so my question for you today is, if we can't even trust the ground we stand on, or the air that's in our lungs, who or what can we trust? And I think that's an important question to ponder, because many people are experiencing a shrinking circle of trust. There are fewer and fewer things in which I can put my trust. Fewer and fewer things or people in whom I can put my trust. So we all have to answer that question for ourselves. In whom or in what are we going to put our trust? The way I'm answering that question is doubling down on Jesus. Because that's my experience. As I've loved the experience of travels, I've also experienced and been blessed to experience that I can trust Jesus the Christ. And I say that for many reasons, but reflecting on today's gospel, I'm going to put forward 3 reasons why as I said, you have to answer that question for yourself. But this is how I answer that question. In whom am I going to put my trust? And my answer is, I'm doubling down on Jesus. As my circle of trust shrinks, it's got to be more and more focused on Jesus. And one reason is what he says in the gospel today. You know, anyone who eats this bread has eternal life. Has, present tense. John is very clear about that. You know, eternal life isn't just something that starts later on. We begin to experience the effects of eternal life in the here and now. So it's in the present tense. So that's one reason why I trust Jesus, is because of the promise of eternal life. But it's not just about what comes at the end of this life. I trust that the teachings, the message, the life of Jesus is one on whom I build my own life. And that's who I am as a disciple. If I call myself a Christian or a Christ follower or a disciple of Jesus, then I must ask myself, well, how do I act? What do I do? What do I say? Well, then I have to look to Jesus. And I've realized in my life, and it took me a little while to get to this point because I wasn't always a priest, let me tell you. But I have come to realize that the message of Jesus is a better way of living my life. Imitating his compassion, his mercy, his love. It's just a better way to live this life. And so I put my trust in that. And then thirdly, the third reason I want to offer you today for trusting in Jesus, my reason, is that Jesus gives himself. Right? We tend to trust people who are giving, but not with a hidden agenda. I mean, you can tell people who are like kind of generous, but you're wondering, okay, well, what am I getting hit up for here, right? But Jesus is authentic. The only thing he wants back from us is our happiness, our joy, our goodness. But Jesus gives of himself, not because he's looking to benefit himself, only because he wants to benefit us. And that's the type of person we generally trust. Someone who has our best interest in mind and heart. And so in the gospel today, Jesus gives of himself, and he's starting to talk about the Eucharist. Today's gospel is a transition Eucharist. So a couple weeks ago, in the last couple weeks, we've been hearing about the miracle of the loaves and fishes. He took a few fish and a few loaves of bread, and he fed how many thousand? That was a real question. You can answer it. Okay. So that was a physical miracle. Jesus cares about people's physical needs. They were hungry, so he responded to their physical need. Why? Because he cares. He's God. But now he's getting us ready. He's getting his audience ready for another way he's going to feed the crowds. And that's with himself. And so today's the transition gospel between what came in the last 2 weeks and what's about to come next week. When next week's gospel is Eucharistic. Jesus giving of himself in the miracle of the Eucharist. But today he's getting his audience ready. He's getting you ready, right? By saying, I am the bread of life. Your ancestors ate physical bread, manna in the desert. But I am the bread that comes down from heaven. And this is the bread that gives eternal life. So he's now transitioning from the physical feeding to the spiritual feeding. And in that, he's not just giving something like the fish and the bread, but he's giving himself. So, if you're a true disciple, as I'm hoping we're trying to be, that's something I have to try to be every day, I'm asking myself, all right, if Jesus gives of himself, and I'm a follower of Jesus, then I have to figure out, well, how do I give of myself? How am I bread for the life of the world? Just as Jesus in today's gospel says, I am the bread from heaven for the life of the world. So as disciples, the natural question is, then how am I bread for the life of the world? How do I give of myself to others to feed them? Not just physically, but spiritually. Well, I talked a lot about trust. You know, the circle of trust is getting pretty small with many people. People are having more and more trust in institutions or things or people. And so let's focus on that. How do we give of ourselves to others? Well, one way is by modeling or showing others how we can trust in Jesus, because people so desperately need that. People, you know, I mean, addictions are skyrocketing during this pandemic. People are losing a sense of the ground they walk on or the air they breathe. And they need something to trust in. And we as disciples of Jesus Christ have to bring testimony to them of what a life trusting in Jesus looks like. Because that's how we're going to feed them. We're going to feed them by trusting in Jesus, because we're showing others what a life of a disciple is who trusts in Jesus. So I'm going to ask you to contemplate something for this Eucharist and maybe for the coming week. You know, what's something that's got you anxious, upset, concerned? For me, it's, as I said, it's my new job. You know, anytime you have a new job, you wonder, you know, I've made it through 2 weeks and they haven't fired me yet, right? But we'll see, you know, but there's those anxieties. Am I going to measure up? Am I going to be able to do this? You know, will I be able to, you know, come through on all the things I promised in the interview, right? So there's the anxiety of that. So today I'm going to put that anxiety on the altar. I'm going to work hard in my new ministry because I believe in it. But I'm going to put the anxiety on the altar and give it to Jesus, right? So I'm going to invite you to do the same thing right now. Think of one thing in your life about which you are anxious. Anxiety, and just me even mentioning it is starting to, you know, give you agita, right? It started, maybe the anxiety is already starting to well up in you. Well, I'm going to invite you to put that on the altar tonight and give it over to Jesus. And it's to say that it's not that Jesus is just going to take it away from you, but we put our trust in the fact that Jesus is going to get us through it. We'll do our part, but then leave the rest to God. God will get me through whatever it is that's making me anxious. So, I'm putting the anxiety of my new job on the altar tonight. I'm sure some of you have some anxieties as well. I'll invite you to put those on the altar as well. Why? Not only for your benefit, but for the benefit of everybody else who needs to see what it looks like to put your trust in Jesus. When you can't even trust the ground you walk on, or the air you breathe, who are you going to trust? I'm doubling down on Jesus.